Alright, what's going on, everybody? So, back again today because I recently made a video talking about the new Bloodshot 1/12 scale Bloodshot figure coming from 30 Fig Zero S Toys, whatever. I don't know. I've never heard of the company prior to this. It's a Bloodshot figure, a 1/12 scale Bloodshot figure that they're going to be making. It's up for pre-order now. And in case you did watch that video, in that video I mentioned that I was on the fence about pre-ordering it or not, and I did. I pre-ordered it, and I'm gonna get into why. I was already on the fence. I was already leaning towards yes, and now I'm gonna get into what made me go ahead and pre-order it. So, my relationship with Valiant Comics is going on a year ago. I was kind of getting fed up with Marvel and DC and trying to figure that mess out. Marvel is arguably a little bit better than DC. DC is an absolute mess, an absolute train wreck. These days, if you want to read DC comics, you kind of just have to read them as like an anthology series. Like, they are what they are. But anyway, so I was looking for an alternative. Someone recommended Valiant Comics. Started looking into it and found out that back in 2012, Valiant Comics completely relaunched their comic book line back from square one, starting everything over, starting all the characters over, the entire universe over. And from 2012 to about 2018, Valiant Comics was killing the comic book game. They were, I think, 2014, 15, and 16. Their books had the most award nominations of any comic book company. I think a few years in a row, they won Event of the Year. Yeah, they were just killing the game. And then in 2018, the content quality dips, and we're going to talk about that. But the point is, so I was like, oh, this is a big collected shared universe of all of these characters, and I hesitate to call it superhero characters. I hesitate to call it superheroes. I think it's more just like, if you want a collected universe that's just like kind of DC and Marvel, except it's really well thought out and everything fits together really well, and the characters are interesting, and thematically it has sometimes it can be like a PG-13 level of content. A lot of times though, it's a rated R level of content. Point is, it's not for children, so there's never going to be any really corny, cringy moments in Valiant. That's what Valiant is. It was comic books for comic book fans and comic book lovers, and it was not backed by some big media company, entertainment company like Warner Brothers or Disney. It was just Valiant. They were just making the comics. So there was no like, oh, we're gonna take this and we're gonna build it into this big multimedia franchise. It's gonna make billions of dollars. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to just to write and illustrate great comics. That was the goal. So I got into it, and over the I read all the way up through from the beginning, from the relaunch in 2012 all the way through Harbinger Wars, and I've kind of stopped and slowed down since then. Been reading other stuff, but I always intended to get back into it, and finding this Bloodshot figure, this like pre-order ad for this new Bloodshot figure has reinvigorated my interest. So started reading more Valiant this past week, but someone commented on that Bloodshot figure video of mine and asked if I could speak on the current state of Valiant and everything that's going on over there. And like I said, I loved what I read of Valiant, and I loved what I read about Valiant. I had not gone deep into the business corporate side of it and the goings on. I knew that the content quality of the comics dipped and started to fall in 2018 because they got bought by a big American Chinese multimedia corporation that wanted to do exactly what I just talked about that they weren't doing. They wanted to turn it into this big multimedia franchise that makes billions of dollars. And yeah, so I did my research. because I told the guy that commented on the previous video about the Bloodshot figure, I said I'd look into it. I've done my research since then, and here's my take on what's going on over at Valiant. We're going to go all the way back to the 2012 relaunch. Like I said, they started everything over, and they got good writers. I'm going to say at the time they were good writers and illustrators, and through their work in Valiant, they proved that they are great. They proved that they are great comic book writers, great comic book artists, and they told great stories and produced great comics from 2012 to 2018. Well, when you're doing great things, it's going to attract attention from people who kind of want to capitalize on your success and see if they can, make some money off of your success. And so it attracted the attention of some big multimedia companies. And in the end, I don't know all the details. I'm not there. I'm not going to say I know how things went down, but all I know is the end result. And the end result is in 2018, DMG Entertainment. This is a multimedia entertainment company corporation that they were behind the movie Looper with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. They were behind Iron Man 3. They've done some big movies, and it's an American Chinese. They have a headquarters in, I believe, Los Angeles, and they have another one in Beijing, China. Yeah, well, they have a headquarters in Beverly Hills, and then they have another headquarters in Beijing, China. So it's an American Chinese venture, and they bought Valiant Comics and rebranded it Valiant Entertainment. And it was for the purpose of, like I said, turning this into a big multimedia franchise, films, live action films, video games. They were like, they saw the success of Valiant Comics and how Valiant Comics was the closest thing. You would think that the closest thing to the MCU in comic book form is the Marvel Comics, and it's really not. Just due to the sheer size of Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics and the story of Marvel Comics has been going on since the 60s, if not earlier. So yeah, the closest thing was Valiant. And DMG realized that, and they're like, this stuff is perfectly adaptable to the big screen for live action, and we can create our own comic book inspired comic book source material, high budget, high grossing live action film franchise. They were going to create the Valiant Cinematic Universe. And they tried. They did try. If you guys remember, right around when COVID started to really get bad, the Bloodshot movie came out with Vin Diesel. And I'm not going to talk about the movie. We know what we either know what happened, what the deal was with that movie. Suffice it to say, it was a very mediocre film. I'm not going to say it was shit. It was mediocre. So yeah, it was a mediocre film, and the fact that it did not get a theatrical release due to COVID just killed it. It destroyed it. It did not make its money back. It did not break even. It tanked financially. So that's all I have to say about the Bloodshot movie. But what I don't, maybe a lot of people know this, maybe they don't. The big picture here is DMG, it does not, to me, as an outsider looking in and just looking at things in hindsight, it does not look like DMG came in and like Disney with Marvel, Disney pumped money into Marvel. It looks like DMG came in and their concern was extracting money from Valiant. It looks like they came in and they said, we want to make big budget live action movies of this shit. However, we need it to sort of pay for itself. So they bought Valiant in 2018, and Valiant Comics became Valiant Entertainment. And that's, like I said, that's when you started to see the quality of the comics drop. And a lot of people, I've watched a lot of videos, I've watched Thinking Critical, I've watched Perch, Comics with Perch. A lot of what I hear them saying is they started to bring on, whether they were fired or whether they just left, a lot of the original people who contributed to Valiant's great success during that 2012-2008 period, next thing you know, they were gone once DMG took ownership. And DMG brought in what I've heard called very subpar comic book creators, more so on the writing side than the artist side. The artwork has been not terrible. The artwork has been fine. I'll say that. It seems like the artwork has been okay. It's been fine. There have been some bad artists put on some books since 2018 for Valiant, but it's really the writers. That's where they brought in, what, for lack of a better way to put it, they brought in shit writers. Why did they do this? Because you can pay a shitty writer who doesn't really have a lot of success under their belt, you can pay them less. And like Valiant, up to that point, Valiant had built up this fandom. Like many big comic book enthusiasts will tell you that, 2013 to 2017, 2018, they were buying and reading everything Valiant published. And I think DMG knew that. They were like, we're going to cut some costs here. They're like, we're going to cut some costs by replacing these writers who have lots of success, and therefore we're going to have to pay them more money. We're going to replace them with mediocre, subpar writers, and we're going to pay them a fraction of the cost. That's my guess. But we're still going to rake in the same level of profits, at least for a while, because Valiant Comics already has this big fandom behind it. So even though we change writers, it's going to take a while for the fans, the consumers, to catch on and realize that the comics suck now and stop buying. So that's how they cut costs, and this we can divert those costs and use it to help pump more money into where they really wanted to go with this, which was, like I said, the live action film franchise. So long story short, as soon as DMG took control, they said, fuck the comics. We don't care if the comics are good anymore. Our goal is live action, big budget films. You all heard the term, you don't put your eggs in one basket. And that's essentially what they did. They sacked the comic books side of it to go all in on a gamble for turning this into a big multimedia franchise based heavily in live action, big budget films. And then that tanked. That fell to shit, with the Bloodshot movie being 1, incredibly mediocre, and then 2, absolutely destroyed by COVID. So they put all their eggs in one basket, and they rolled the dice, and they lost. And now they are suffering. And I've been posting on Reddit trying to get more information, and what it seems to be is they took that giant hit because DMG put Valiant Comics in this position where it's like, we're going to sacrifice you guys to go all in on a bet for a film franchise. That bet did not pay off, and rather than DMG coming in and eating the cost of it and taking the blame, sure, but more importantly eating the cost of it, they seem to be putting the cost for that failure directly back on Valiant Comics, which they basically sacrificed just to try and do the film franchise in the first place. So Valiant Comics, if you want to think of it as Valiant Entertainment, Valiant Entertainment has money because DMG is this big multimedia corporation that has money. But they are not pumping the necessary money into Valiant Comics to keep it alive. All right? They're basically letting it die. They bought it. They tried to use it to create a big money-making franchise. That didn't work, and now they're basically saying, fuck it. Let it die. So what's happened since then? And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Let them die. Well, you'd think that, okay, the movie franchise thing did not pay off. Maybe we should go back to what we do best and, take a step back, regroup, and get back to basics, which is making great comics. Maybe that's the answer. It seems like DMG doesn't give a fuck about that. DMG seems to be like, no, we're not doing that. We did not buy this to make comics. We bought this because we thought that it had the potential to be a big budget, highly grossing live action film franchise. And now that that's failed, we don't want to go back to comics. Fuck comics. We're not into comics. We'd rather just let it die. And part of if they were to go back to like, hey, let's try to just go back to basics and make great comics, one of the things you think they would do is let's get some real talent in here writing these comics again. But that would require money to pay that great talent, which, like I said, DMG does not want to do. DMG does not want to give them the money necessary to hire great comic book writing talent because they don't care about the comics. So the comic book side of things, which is really the only side to Valiant, the other sides of it, the movie franchise didn't take off. It didn't go anywhere. So I say it's the comic book side of things. Really, it's the only side of things, and they just don't have the money. A lot of people just recently left. They're going down to like a skeleton crew of people working at Valiant, and it's because they don't have the money. DMG forced them to put all of their eggs in one basket, and then they bet that basket on a big film franchise, and it did not pay off. Now, what do I think they should do? Personally, I think exactly what I said. I think they should just go back to their basics, regroup, get back to basics, go back to square one, what they know, their bread and butter, making great comics. But that would require DMG to come down off their high horse and put money into the comic books. That means hiring great content creators, hiring great artists and illustrators, and hiring great writers. But that costs money. If you've got a comic book writer they're really good at writing stories and they've proven it, their salary, their money that they're gonna want is gonna be higher than some fucking nobody who tells a shit story. And then they did. I tried to find information about the whole Valiant Comics and their NFT launch thing. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of information about it other than that Valiant Comics and Valiant Entertainment as a whole was trying to get into the NFT game. I don't really get NFTs. I don't understand that all that shit. All I could basically find was that too was not working it wasn't working. If anyone has any more amplifying information on the NFT side of things and that whole thing, please leave some comments down below. Explain it, because people watching this video probably want to know if they don't know already. I would also personally like to know what the deal was with that. But from what I could find was, long story short, one of the things they tried to do to generate income was get into this NFT game, and nobody gave a shit. And it's not working. It's not working, and they should just go back to comics. But DMG does not want to put the money into making comics. So it looks like DMG just treats it like a loss. It's like we bought Valiant. We thought it could be a big budget, awesome film franchise. It didn't turn out that way, so now fuck Valiant. And that is a shame, because it was, for about 6 years there, it was so freaking great. And yeah, it did. And to be honest, it did, in my opinion, it did, and it both still does have the potential to turn into something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that requires money. And I don't know. I don't know what their plan is. I'm talking about DMG. I don't know what their plan is for Valiant. It could be that they're just waiting for enough time to go by to where they try again at the film franchise thing. But what it seems to be abundantly clear is that they do not give a fuck about the comics. And the problem with that is the success of Valiant Comics for those 6 years, 2012 to 2018, that was the linchpin of all the hope for the film franchise. Those 6 years of publishing comics and publishing great comics, that's what told DMG in the first place, if we make this into a film franchise, we've got a lot of people, we've got a pretty good fan base who we know we're guaranteed to sell movie tickets to. These people who have fallen in love with this comic book universe over the last 6 years, they're guaranteed to come watch these movies. The longer they go with making the comics complete shit, the less and less they can depend on that. And eventually they're going to get to a point where even if they want to take another crack at a film franchise, they're going to be looking at it and going, well, it's been, 18. I'm not good at math, so you gotta bear with me here for a second. It's been 4 years already of them publishing just kind of like meh shit in terms of comics. And so next thing you know, it's going to be 5+ years. DMG is going to be looking at it going, do we want to take another crack at the film franchise? Well, over the past 5+ years, we've lost that initial fan base that we were depending on to come buy movie tickets. So now if we make a big live action movie that costs a lot of money, we're just kind of winging it. We're hoping that people just take a chance on it. We don't even have that comic book fan base to depend on to buy movie tickets because we ruined that. If DMG still was interested in making something of their purchase of Valiant, they would pump money into it. But they're not doing that, and that's what tells me that they've just kind of written it off as a loss and said fuck it. And that's a shame because that means Valiant is going down. And that's a shame because it was so great. It was the answer to everyone who is tired of Marvel and DC's shit. Valiant Comics was the answer. But you know, as many comic book enthusiasts will tell you, it's not necessarily what happens when some big multimedia corporation steps in and tries to make money off of this shit. It's not guaranteed this is what happens, but this is the risk you run. This is the risk that you take on when that happens, when a big multimedia corporation steps in and takes control. You run the risk of losing the comics, essentially. Arguably, that's what happened. That's what has happened with DC and Marvel. Like, if you think for 1 second, like, not talking about Marvel or DC, if you think for 1 second that Disney and Discovery Warner really give a shit if the comic books are selling well, you're wrong. What they really care about, Disney and Discovery Warner, what they really care about are these really expensive, high budget, high grossing film franchises doing well. That's the name of the game with them now. You know, the amount of money generated is so different. You know, with comics, a great success in comics is millions of dollars. A great success in a film franchise, as we've seen now multiple times, is billions of dollars. So it's a big leap. So yeah, Discovery Warner does not care about DC Comics. Disney does not care about Marvel Comics. And it looks like DMG is the same way. They only cared about Valiant to the extent which it could be made into a billion-dollar multimedia franchise. Billions of dollars multimedia franchise. And now that that's proven to not work, not proven, that's another thing too. It's like now that has, I'm not going to say proven to not work, but now that they've tried that and it did not work, they seem to be just kind of over it. Personally, I think it could still work. The only downside to that is if it did work, if they did take another crack at doing a film franchise and the film franchise proves successful, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get the great comics back. All it means is that, well, now there's an interest in these characters, but it's going to be in live action film franchise form. You know, in order for, as long as DMG owns Valiant, the comics are dead, in my opinion, and that's a shame. Now, if we want to talk about, if you're like me and you actually really did love Valiant Comics and you don't want to give up just yet, you want to try, you want to see what we can do, I think that the best thing for them and for us is that toy line. You know, regardless of whether the film franchise worked out or not, regardless of whether the comics are great right now or not, these characters are great. And the stories in the past have been great, and people have loved these characters and they've loved those past stories. And because of that, I think that there are a lot of Valiant fans who would love to buy these collectible figures of these characters that they love, regardless of the fact that the comics kind of suck now. I think there are a lot of people who they know they appreciate Valiant for its greatness that it had, back in those years, and because of that, they still like, yeah, I would like to have a nice shelf, a nice display of all my favorite Valiant characters. Have a Bloodshot figure, Exo Man of War, Ninja. They go back and forth between calling him Ninja K and Ninjak. I like Ninjak better, but it's been both. But yeah, a shelf of figures with all your favorite Valiant characters: Bloodshot, Exo Man of War, Shadow Man, Ninjak. Who else? Archer and Armstrong, Quantum and Woody, all those. I think that is a smart way for them to go. And the reason for that is because I think those are guaranteed to sell regardless of the state of any film franchise or comics. I think because of the past success and people's past love for those characters and those stories that those characters were in, I think those toys, those collectible toys, those are guaranteed to still sell. So if you were a past Valiant fan, or if you still, like me, you consider yourself a Valiant fan because you're still loyal to how great it used to be, pre-order this Bloodshot figure. And then if it gets enough money, they'll make more. They'll make a Shadow Man, they'll make an Exo Man of War, they'll make a Ninjak, and pre-order those as well. And that will at least show someone out there with some level of authority and power that while we don't love what you're doing with it right now, we still have love for these characters. That'll show them that the interest is not completely dead. We just don't like what you're doing right now. And that, I'm not saying that's going to turn it around and fix it, but it can't hurt. And at the end of the day, you still end up with at least like a cool Bloodshot figure. And seeing as how the only Bloodshot figures we have are the movie one, which is shit, and then the TB League like 10-inch doll, I think that this 1/12 scale Bloodshot figure I think is like, it's perfect. It's a really nice figure. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, even if it doesn't work, you still end up with a cool Bloodshot figure. Or even if the Bloodshot figure takes off and they do more characters, but it does not revitalize the comic book line or the film franchise, at least you still have this collection of Valiant character figures. So I think that's the best way to move forward. I think we, as the consumers and the fans, we should buy these. And I think that on the Valiant DMG side, I think they should really push this toy line hard. I think they'll find out that it's pretty successful. So that's my take. Long story short, Valiant was great. Got bought out by a multimedia corporation that wanted to turn it into big budget movie franchise. That did not work out, and because that did not work out, the big corporation DMG, they've just kind of abandoned it. And without their help, it's dead. So yeah, that's my take. Like I said, if anyone has any more amplifying information on this topic, please share it in the comments below. I would love to know. I'm sure other people would love to know. And on top of that, if I got anything just blatantly wrong, please correct me. Like I said, I did what research I could. I watched the interviews and read the articles that I could read. I went on Reddit a little bit, and I got the information I could get. But if I was just absolutely wrong about anything, please put it down in the comments below and correct me. No harm done if you do. But yeah, that's my take. Let me know what you guys think. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It really helps out my channel. If you want to help out the channel even more, check out some of my other videos and subscribe. But other than that, I'll talk to you all later.